Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I'm going to start with a message for Producer Guy. As Producer Guy quite often says to us, boys, please don't talk about football. And we say, but sir, we love talking about football. And he says, this is not a football podcast, it's a football finance podcast. You can talk about football down the pub. And we go, sir, please let us talk about football. And he taps a photograph of Michael McIntyre and Swiss Ramble and says other people are available. So my message to Producer Guy is that for this week, we are not talking about football. Oh boy, we are not talking about football. And the way things are going, we might not be talking about football for quite some weeks. So,
absolutely.
How are you, Kieran?
I'm good. I'm not in sunny Sussex. I'm in extremely wet Sussex at present. So Finley's not been for his walk this morning. So he's sitting next to me, giving me the look. The look which the Baroness sometimes gives me when I'm talking about spreadsheets to her at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, well, if it's any consolation, Smudge is sitting underneath the bamboo hedge that we inherited when we bought the house in the mistaken belief, despite the fact she's had 8 years' experience, that it's waterproof. It's not. Mm-hmm. So I'll be dealing with that. And he said, so you've got a barking dog and I'll have to be drying off a cat halfway through. Apart from that, all good. I'm a bit sulky. I read a very interesting article. Somebody sent it to me yesterday from the Telegraph about how you can spot that you're in the presence of the wokerati, somebody who's too middle class for their own good. And it said that quinoa has become a rather tired cliche for identifying middle class people. So I'm going to have to find something else to describe Brighton fans, Kieran. I don't know what it is. Unfortunately, couscous and polenta are also on the list, so I'm struggling. So let's answer some football questions, Kieran.
Yes, indeed.
And the first one comes from Simon Robinson, and it's one of those questions I'm happy to ask. Again, it's a subject we've covered, but it's always worth revisiting it because it's a question we're always being asked. And Simon says, since almost all professional clubs in England make eye-watering losses, what's in it for the owners and their business empires? Can they move losses around the group and offset them against other profits?
Well, Simon, yes, they can, is the simple answer, if they've got a very good accountant. So we have seen historically some clubs have made significant losses and then they've transferred those losses to the parent company. So Middlesbrough is an example. The Middlesbrough owner has been extremely generous towards the club, but there have been some tax benefits for the ultimate holding company there. It doesn't tend to be the case that the revenue have tightened up the rules, so we've not seen that for a few years. But I think Borough did it certainly a few years ago. In respect of the issue of ownership models, I refer people to a book called The Price of Football, which says why buy a football club. Available at all good bookstores. And quite a few crap ones. Why buy a football club? And the answers are love, profit, vanity, and insanity. So there are some people. We are both benefiting from the fact that our clubs are owned or partly owned by people who've got a genuine affection for the club, and there's a good chance that had it not been for those people, we wouldn't have a club to support. So. Some people who have been independently successful and have supported a football club for many years end up buying it because they can, and it's something to tell your mates. I've loved this club so much I went out and bought it. It's fantastic with regards to that. So that's I'd say at one end of the scale. There's the profit motive. The Glazers are not popular owners of Manchester United, but they bought Manchester United in 2005 for around about £700 million. Most of that money wasn't theirs, and if they chose to sell it today, they could easily sell it for £4 to £5 billion. So there is the opportunity to make profit, and of course the Glazers have also extracted significant dividends from the club over the course of their tenure of ownership. All perfectly legal, of course. And then we've got sort of vanity purchases. If you are a billionaire and nobody's heard of you, and you're going, well, hold on, I'm a billionaire. I've been I've been very successful. I've inherited money or whatever. I've got the yacht. I've got the apartment in Monaco. But all the people I go to canapé parties with, they are also owners of yachts, and they've also got uh, the trappings of wealth. What football offers, especially football in this country, because it is so popular globally, it offers scarcity. There can only be 20 Premier League football clubs at any one time, and if some of those owners get their way, they'll only be 18. But that's a separate story, of course. And therefore, it gives you the opportunity to say, well, would you like to come to my club on Saturday? Yeah, we are hosting. We're hosting Arsenal or Liverpool or Manchester United or City or there's and that adds to your kudos. So there are vanity purchases, and then there's insanity. And I give you Lawrence Bassini.
Canapes wasn't on that list of
cliche
middle class food, so I might be using it. Now you've mentioned the Glazers. We did have a question in from Tim Chambers, who said that we've patiently explained how that Glazer takeover happened before, but he still can't get his head around it. So perhaps this idea that a club can be bought basically with the club's money. So could you give us a brief refresher for Tim?
Yes, Tim. This is what's referred to as a leveraged buyout, and it is common in the world of mergers and acquisitions. And what happens is that you've got a company which has either no debt or next to no debt, and that was the case of Manchester United in 2005. Under the previous ownership regime, Manchester United actually had cash in the bank and zero borrowings, which means it's a bit like if you acquire a house which doesn't have a mortgage. In theory, you can go and take out a huge mortgage using the house as security, and this is what the Glazers decided to do. So they went to buy Manchester United from a collection of owners. The club didn't have any debt, so therefore they said to the existing shareholders, "We will buy your shares from you, but we don't have the money ourselves. So what we're going to do is the club is going to take out a loan." And that's the way it's done now. And if it works spectacularly well from a financial perspective. We have seen Burnley's owners take out a similar approach, the ALK group, and it's on a much smaller scale than that of Manchester United. But Burnley are now sitting at the top of the Championship. They could be coming back to the Premier League. The aim is to increase the value of the club, and then you make a profit, pay off the debt, and you normally quids in on a huge multiplier basis. So leverage buyouts are very, very popular with owners who are willing to take on risk, and ultimately it's the club that takes on the risk. It's the club that pays the interest. And in the case of Manchester United, remember they borrowed £700 million. They've paid £868 million in interest since 2005, and the debt's not gone down. So it might appear on the face of it to be something which makes no sense, but if you crunch the numbers into your spreadsheet, it is a very successful model.
Now, Kieran, if Tim is anything like me, it could be the word shareholders that unlocks the key to that mystery. Because like many football fans, when it first happened, I assumed it was a kind of shadowy Glazers going behind the owner's back, sorting the money out and then presenting them with a fait accompli. But it's not that at all, is it? It's all open and above board. And for quite some time, the shareholders did quite well out of it. So I think that's what many people, that's where the misunderstanding was, I think, for many people, was that this was a mysterious takeover against the wishes of the previous owners, but that couldn't be further from the truth, could it?
No, and again, if we use a house analogy, if I buy your house, i.e., you're the effective existing shareholder of the house, do you actually give a damn where I get my money from? Especially if I offer you a really good price, you just come along and say, "Well, yeah, that sounds like a good deal for me." as long as you get your check. And remember, the Manchester United was owned by a variety of shareholders at the time. They don't care how you source your funds. They just want the sale price from the house, or in this case, Manchester United shares.
Interesting you should say that, Kieran, because when we sold our last house 8 years ago, it was our first house, to be honest. We were there for a long time. We sold it with some reluctance to move somewhere. But when we did sell it, the first person to come around and look at it offered us the asking price and said he could sort the mortgage out, the money, by the following week, which we thought was very good, but slightly suspicious. And when we hadn't heard anything from him by Tuesday, we phoned up the number that he gave us, and his wife answered it and said, he can't talk to you today. He's in court for embezzlement. And as you say, my first thought was rats. Why didn't he arrest him next week rather than this? Yes. Like you said, if he paid cash in hand and the money we wanted, that would have been fine. Gareth Nunn gives us a little bit of autobiographical detail. Gareth Nunn says that he's Irish and that he's lived in Madrid since 2004. And Gareth says, since moving here, I get to see almost all of 38 games involving my beloved Arsenal. And there have been times when this has been a curse rather than a blessing. Unfortunately, Gareth, we can't comment on the fact that Arsenal are having a really good season because producer Guy has made it quite plain. We can't talk about football. On a recent pod, someone asked about who pays the camera operators at games. And Kieran said for the Premier League, Sky put the cameras in the ground and record everything. Now, I can watch almost any game at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, including Palace. I don't like the way he said including Palace there. So if he said especially Palace, that would have been better, Gareth, but never mind. Since this can't be shown on UK TV, and the ones who use the footage are overseas broadcasters and Match of the Day, do Sky get a cut of those broadcasting deals since they are supplying the workers, equipment, etc.? Thanks a million. And if you're ever in Madrid, beers and tapas are on me. That's very kind of you, Gareth.
Oh, yes, perhaps Price of Football live in Spain.
That'd be great. Well, considering the stick I got for my American accent last week, the idea of trying to do it, my Steve McLaren type Spanish accent wouldn't go down too well in Madrid.
Well, thanks for the question, Gareth, and also for the offer. With regards to the costs, Sky and BT either do this internally. Sky do have a lot of broadcast experience, or if I think we are recording this on the Sunday. There's 5 matches taking place live on a Sunday. They don't, and of course they've got the deal with the EFL as well. So some of the broadcasting is effectively outsourced to freelancers, or they'll get another company in. So there's a lot of money being distributed to different parties. So it's not a case of Sky necessarily having 10 dedicated camera crews themselves. They certainly do have some, but on certain weekends they might have to outsource. The costs of physically recording, those are agreed between the Premier League, Sky, and the outsourced people, and those are effectively treated as central costs. So therefore, when the BBC pays for Match of the Day, they don't do any of the recording themselves, and the fee that they pay covers the costs that the Premier League are incurring in respect of the broadcast cost itself. The clubs are effectively bearing some of that as well, because the Premier League has to pay, or via Sky they have to pay for the broadcasts, and then that decreases the amount of money available in the pot to be distributed to individual clubs.
It's really interesting, Ken. I remember talking to Steve Parish and Steve Browett not long after Palace had been promoted to the Premier League, and we have mentioned this. Probably, it normally costs a club promoted to the Premier League about £5 million to get the stadium Premier League ready. Most of which is on broadcasting facilities and making sure the floodlights are bright enough, and making sure that the Premier League basically tell them where this product is watched around the world, it's got to be of the highest quality from every club. So it's astonishing. People don't realise how much it costs the clubs to get all the cabling, all the facilities for broadcasting people. And it's money they spend, obviously, but because they get a lot of money from the broadcasting deal. But I don't think people quite realise how much it costs football clubs to get a stadium ready to show football. Yeah,
but we're not talking about football.
No, we're not talking about football, and technically that had the word football in it, so you're quite right. And talking about stadium, it's almost like I subconsciously segue to this, Kieran, and it is subconscious, trust me. Thomas Johnson has a very interesting question. Thomas says, I have a question about stadium maintenance costs and their impact on clubs' fortunes. I'm not quite sure why Bradford City continually linger in League Two, despite their average attendances of around 15,000, which is astonishing, really, Kieran, considering the level of football they're playing at. Is their League Two status partly related to the size of their stadium and the cost of maintaining it?
It isn't. This is Bradford City is an intriguing case. First of all, I want to give them a high five. Their most recent accounts, they've gone from being, I think I described them as having the worst accounts in football about 4 years ago.
Oh wow!
And I'm taking no credit for this, but they've certainly upped their game recently. So they've now got very detailed figures. The issue with Bradford, and they've been getting 18,000 this season, which for League Two is amazing. You've got to give the people a lot of credit for they've said, right, we want to get as many people in as possible, and we're going to make it as available as possible. £198 for a season ticket at Bradford, so it works out as £8.60 per game for an adult, which is an amazing price. And therefore, it's sold out. As far as the running costs of the club, they're actually relatively modest by EFL club standards, certainly for the lowest two divisions. On the back of those high attendances, Bradford had revenues of 7.3 million in the most recent pre-COVID year, which certainly puts it right at the very top end of League Two. I think it was slightly above Plymouth that year, for example. But it's not enough an advantage to guarantee promotion. So there is this paradox in that there's lots of people who get the opportunity to go to Bradford, and to be fair to the fans who go to Valley Parade, they go there, which is fantastic. But it's not enough to be able to put into the playing budget to give them a sufficient advantage to effectively buy or guarantee promotion.
Yeah, you can't imagine Mark Hughes came cheap as manager. Bradford are one of those clubs I always look out for. A, because of their kit. I've always loved their kit when I was a kid. B, because I've got family in Bradford, none of whom support Bradford City, even though they're football mad. And there's Bradford's problem. People talk about Newcastle United and their dominance in the North East. Unless you've been to Yorkshire, that West Yorkshire, you don't understand how much Leeds United dominates that part of the world. Everyone is automatically, even when Leeds was struggling in the Championship, that people around there tend to look to Leeds. So I think Bradford made a really clever decision to make those prices as cheap as they are, and to make it's almost free for a lot of children. I think that was a wise thing to do. I sometimes wonder, Kieran, why more clubs don't have a similar model.
Well, it's certainly something which clubs perhaps consider. I mean, Bradford is a big city in its own right. I know it's close to Leeds, so it is a big city. If we look at somewhere such as Morecambe or Accrington, they're relatively small towns, and therefore there's a limited number of people. Yeah, if you halve the price, then you've got to double the number of people attending before you break even. And then of course you need additional stewards, you need additional running costs. So the numbers when they're crunched don't necessarily stack up. In the case of Bradford, I've got nothing but admiration, because they're bringing football to the people.
See, that explanation is a clear illustration of why you're the country's leading football finance expert, and I'm asking you questions for a living. A living.
Living would involve payments. Instead of doing it for smiles.
Yeah, one day he'll read those emails that we sent him about the living wage. But there you go. Adam Bull is a Lincoln fan, and if Bradford are in your good stead, Lincoln have always been in your good books.
Yeah.
Adam Bull's a Lincoln fan, as I say. Adam says, in the city, we are employing a new, more sustainable model, buying youngsters with potential and hopefully selling them on at a profit. My question is, do managers, talent spotters, or anybody else get a commission on any profit made when a player is sold?
Yes, they potentially do. Everything comes down to your contract. So It could be that we could have individual members of staff who are entitled to development to some cut in respect of player sales. It can be managers. On some occasions, I believe owners have taken a slice as well. So it is a way of encouraging people at the club to get involved and to develop. Certainly, in the case of Lincoln, that is the case. I was out. I was out for a drink with Liam, who's the chief exec of Lincoln, a couple of weeks ago, and I think him and Clive and the way that they run the club is very progressive. It is that it's inclusive in the sense that they have meetings with fan groups on a regular basis. They're very, very open, and if you're open and honest with people, then it actually reduces the ability of people to criticise because there's if we go back to the Glazers, Manchester United fans are very, very angry towards the Glazers. Part of the reason for that is that the Glazers never speak to them. The Manchester United playing budget, and I know this isn't funded by the Glazer family themselves. I know it comes effectively from internal sources, is very competitive, but that message is either communicated very badly or not communicated at all, and that's why we have this ongoing issue in terms of the resentment towards the people who bought and I'll be honest, profited from the club. Whereas at places such as Lincoln, they just say, this is what we're doing. This is how we've made the decision. These are the financial consequences. We can't guarantee we're going to get promotion, but we believe that by taking such an approach, by growing the size of the stadium, by trying to be more inclusive in terms of the fan base, it gives us greater sustainability. And through sustainability, we've got a chance of getting to the championship, and then things go from there.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Hugh Roberts, and it's a subject we have talked about on and off, but it's one that I'm happy to revisit because it's, as you know, it's a real bugbear of mine. Because I genuinely think this is a good idea, and you genuinely think it isn't. But Hugh Roberts says, I've often wondered if a return to the old Division 3 North and Division 3 South would be financially beneficial to the lower league clubs, as it would reduce travel costs for clubs and fans, and possibly create more revenue with more potential local derbies. Some say this would dilute the quality of the game, yet it does work lower in the period with national leagues North and South. Now, the problem is that clubs tend to agree with you, Ken. When you talk to clubs, they don't particularly like this idea, do
they? I think in 2022, more and more clubs are thinking about how can we reduce our cost base. Certainly we know that heating and lighting costs have gone up.
Yeah,
the cost of fuel is going through the roof. I walk the dog past our local petrol station each morning, and it literally goes up by the day. So it is a consideration. And also, as somebody that's commuting from Brighton to Liverpool, that the price of rail fares are just crazy. And that's if you can find a train that's running on time or on a regular basis. So there are certainly considerations. So I understand where Hugh's coming from. I absolutely sympathise with your position as well. And yesterday, we're recording this on Sunday. Yesterday, if we take a look at the National League, we had Altrincham playing at Torquay.
Yeah.
And the match had been moved for TV purposes to 5:30 p.m. on a Saturday.
I know.
That's where I get really angry, sort of on behalf of Alty fans. I used to live in Alty, so it is certainly a consideration. The reason why I'm always a little bit circumspect about it is that if we take a look at the National League, which Hugh has raised, we've got a National League North, which is consisting almost all of full-time professional teams. And then we've got National League South, which is practically all part-time. And those divisions are deemed to be equal in terms of standard. Now, with the best will in the world, full-time teams tend to have players who are a bit fitter than those who are part-time. So it has led to perhaps a dilution as far as the National League South is concerned. Whilst I don't think this would be an issue if we split League One into League One North and League One South, it also the train spotter part of me, and I am an obsessive person. That part of me, if I was supporting Plymouth or Barrow, practically every match is a long distance anyway, and I'm a ground hopper. So I've done 117 grounds watching some football club or other. It would effectively mean that if I was from Brighton or Palace and we were in League One or Two, or this combined lower league, we would never get the opportunity to go to Barrow or to Carlisle, and I think that's a shame, because part of the fun of being an away fan are those lunatic trips that you make, not every season, where. I remember going to Carlisle and back in the day from Brighton, and it was a great day out. And it gives you the opportunity to see more of the country. And there's another issue. Where is the line between North and South? Because you've got to have a barrier, and you could end up with two clubs which are 20 miles apart, but for the sake of having to have, or the necessity of having to have the same number of clubs in each division, you could have, Walsall might end up never playing Mansfield because one was deemed to be just south of the divide, because they've had to effectively push Walsall into the south, and you've got Mansfield who are just north, and actually geographically they're not a huge way apart.
Yeah, I think Gloucester are in National League North, which doesn't make sense to a lot of. There are some strange anomalies, and like you say, because we spoke to the owner of Plymouth about this, and he said, "Well, if you're Plymouth, everywhere. So you can be regional. Yes. You can be as regional as you want. But if Southend are in the same league as Plymouth, that's still a long journey. They might be on the same sort of line of latitude or whatever it is. Geography is another subject that's not high on my list of goods. But it is an interesting. It unfortunately, as you say, as economics gets trickier and trickier, you sometimes do think the cost of going from Accrington to Plymouth is just ludicrous. But I can say when Ali's away, I don't, believe it or not, I don't tend to cook as properly as I do when Ali's here. And one of my guilty secrets is the Co-op do this spatchcock chicken. Takes an hour to cook. 4 weeks ago it was £5. Yesterday it was £7.70. This is why people are struggling. For those nice middle class people listening to this, wondering what the fuss is about, it's getting ludicrous. And for football clubs, I mean, I do worry the heating bills. I mean, there's a couple of pubs around us that are going into hibernation for the winter because they simply can't afford to pay the energy bills, and they're just hoping that they'll still be there come spring.
That's insane.
It's 2022, Kieran, in the fifth largest economy in the world. Anyway, our next question is about something that happened a while ago, but I don't think we've ever spoken about it. And it's a story that I like. And the question comes from, and I apologise in advance to Bryn Brothers, because the question comes from Bryn Brothers. And Bryn, I'm sorry, you must get this all the time, but I wouldn't rest easy without asking whether that's one of you or two of you. I can't let that pass. I'm sure you get it all the time. It must be a nightmare for you. Talking of nightmares, the thought just came into me. You mentioned buying my house. I just thought about being your tenant and Uncle Terry coming round for the rent. So, again, subconsciously, I don't know why I saw the word Barry Fry and Uncle Terry popped into mind. Bryn Brothers has this question. During the 2017-18 season, Peterborough United's director of football, Barry Fry, was fined and suspended from all football activities for 4 months. His crime was to place a bet with bookies that one of the club's players would win the league's Golden Boot. He was supported by the club in this matter, as they claimed that he was attempting to offset the payment that the player would receive in the form of a performance bonus. They argued this was prudent financial management. The player did indeed win the Golden Boot that season. My question is, says Bryn, can insurance be purchased in the form of a one-off premium to cover a potential performance bonus payment being activated like this one. So, in a nutshell, Barry Fry put a fair bit of money on this player to be the top scorer in the league. And he claimed that he did that because if he was the top scorer at the club that season, he was getting a huge bonus. So, on the face of it, it made sense. Technically, it was illegal, which is why he got the foul against the laws of football. So, can you get a one-off insurance for this, Kieran?
You certainly can. The insurance industry has very, very close links now with football. You can effectively insure for practically anything, and clubs do take out in insurance bonus things. Policies, and the reason for that is to do with timing. So, if you are promoted to the Premier League, for example, you get your first payment from the Premier League on around about the third week in June. Now, it could be that if you're promoted in May, then the players are entitled to their bonuses in May. So where does the cash come from? So therefore, the insurance industry will do an assessment, and they will offer you opportunities to take out a policy for practically anything, and that includes player bonuses. The benefits of that is it allows the club to budget with a greater degree of certainty, because once you've paid your insurance policy to probably to Aviva rather than William Hill, I think there's a little bit more credibility. Then you know exactly how much you're financially committed to, and if you don't do this, the consequences can be quite unpleasant. So if we go back to 2010, for example, Portsmouth, if people may recall, Portsmouth got to the FA Cup final, and people looked at the starting 11. They thought, there's a couple of players who I thought would be playing in that, and they weren't able to play those players because the players had clauses in their contracts which said should certain things be achieved, then bonuses were kicking in, and the Portsmouth's finances were chaotic, to put it quite mildly, and the club just took the decision. Well, we're in the FA Cup final, so we're not going to pay those players. Now, if they'd taken out an insurance policy, they would have been able to pay the players. They have already paid they'd have paid their insurance costs, and they could have done things from a footballing point of view as opposed to a financial. So. You can get insurance for everything. We've spoken about these days that most transfers at the elite level are done on credit. And we've seen that collectively the Premier League owes 1.6 billion pounds to other clubs. What happens if one of those clubs doesn't pay? Well, if as the selling club, what you can now do is that you can buy an insurance policy which says if let's say Liverpool sold Coutinho to Barcelona. If Barcelona don't pay, then the insurance company can potentially pay out. So you can take out all. If there's a risk involved, there's an insurance policy available. That's the long and the short of it.
This is probably, Kieran, a question for our legal friend Nick DeMarco, but not having a spare 2,000 quid on me, I'll probably ask you instead.
He's on his honeymoon at present.
Is he?
Yeah. I was at his book launch event on Wednesday. Yeah, he got he and his partner tied the knot last weekend. So congratulations to Nick, and wish the two of you all the best for the future.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, as he's on his honeymoon, Kieran, I definitely won't interrupt him. If his wife's anything like the Baron, or his partner's anything like the Baroness, he won't want a phone call going. It's Kevin here from Price of Football. Those two players who had that clause in their contract, they're missing the FA Cup final. Could they not have said, you don't need to activate the clause?
Yes, you can always waive. But the nature of a contract is that you simply have an alteration to the contract, so you can waive the entitlement. But in this case, there's always a bit of brinkmanship, and I think there were much bigger issues taking place at Pompey at the time. It was a classic example of a poor governance and the club being used as a sort of a musical chairs past the parcel of toxic assets. If only if only there had been an independent regulator of football available then, Kevin, perhaps a better set of eyes could have been applied to the owners.
I'm going to get a bell, Kieran, just because otherwise I just have to go, hey all. Barry Fry gave Selhurst Park one of the most remarkable 30 seconds. I can't remember who he was managing at the time. It might have been Birmingham, or might be when he was managing Peterborough. But he was quite a portly chap, Barry Fry. I don't know what he's like now, but he was certainly quite portly at the time. And his team scored, and he set off on a run to the corner flag, which normally would infuriate Palace fans, but because of his size, everyone was just really worried, and you could see the St John's ambulance they just got up, started heading towards the corner flag, and everyone's going over, and he got to the corner flag, and he stopped for about 10 seconds, took a couple of deep breaths, and then sprinted back again to a generous round of applause from Palace fans, I have to say. Our last question comes from Sean Fox, and this is a very interesting one. Again, it's not strictly financial, but it's too interesting not to ask, to be honest. And Sean Fox's question is this: the amount of technology in football increases every year, and one area that's increased hugely is the tracking of player performance. Now, players are wearing bibs now that record things like distance travelled, heart rate, performance zones, etc. No doubt this information is very useful in developing training plans, rehabbing injured players, load management and other things. But my question is, what happens with the data even? Who has access to the data? It seems like there would be lots of potential privacy concerns surrounding this data, and I'm wondering how the English leagues handle it. Do the Premier League and the EFL have policies in place? Is it handled on a team-by-team basis? And I suppose from a financial aspect, Kieran, other clubs might pay quite a lot of money to get access to this data, wouldn't they, about potential players that they want to buy or players that they're going to play against?
Yes. As you say, this is not really a finance area, so therefore I'm indebted to my friend Tom Murray of Mishcons, who's one of my sports lawyer chums. So I contacted Tom about this, and he says one of the common misconceptions, and I'm in part of this, about data, is that data has no owner. Data is data. But the legal issue is who can control it and who can use it. And there are ongoing issues here. So there's something called Project Red Card, which is being organised effectively via sort of player unions and ex-player unions. And the person in charge of this is the ex-football manager, Russell Sallard, who has he was manager of quite a few clubs. And the argument being put forward here by the players and the players' union is that surely that's part of our IP, and we should be able to have control and restrict access to that data with regards to us. When I contacted Tom, he says, well, the chances is that if you take a look at the small print of the player's contract, it says that the club is entitled to request that you wear these data vests, and B, the club is entitled to then use it. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty here. What happens if the player moves? Is the player entitled to take their data with them, or is it kept by the previous club? Because that could be really useful when the two clubs, the former club and the new club, in relation to the player they meet. Because we might say, well, we know that this player for the first 65 minutes is operating at 90%, and then there's normally a big drop off. So therefore, target him in the last half hour of the match, and so you can see that it certainly does have financial value and also playing value. It's an area which is constantly developing, as data science does. There's an awful lot of uncertainty about it because there was a few years ago, there was a bit of a dispute between Liverpool and Manchester City, two clubs that clearly don't seem to like each other, which resulted in Liverpool effectively paying Manchester City a £1 million out-of-court settlement for information with regards to City players, because I think Liverpool recruited some staff from Manchester City. Those staff might have had access using passwords to Manchester City's data bank and so on. So and the case has always been very much out of court settlement. Both clubs have signed NDAs, but if the fact that that's going for seven figures and that relates to issues a few years ago, I'd be very intrigued to think just how much is that information worth today.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution to the pod, then please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. We should be back on Thursday with our usual news pod. Until then, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary film.
Well, as always, folks, thank you very much for all the variety of ways in which you support the show, keeping us on our toes. It's good for us, and we appreciate the kind words as well. Patreon is one way of supporting the show for as little as £1 a month, and you get our love and positive vibes. You can, of course, use your app and give us a 5-star review. It doesn't matter what you say, and as far as the narrative is concerned, you could even say you would rather have because we're almost at Halloween. You'd rather have the show presented by Michael Myers and Kieran Dyer, and it wouldn't bother us. And another way of supporting the show, we are delighted to have been nominated and made the shortlist for Podcast of the Year. We're up against big hitters. We know. In all probability, we're not going to win it. But if you'd like to go to the Football Supporters Association website and vote for us for Podcast of the Year, so that we can come a plucky 5th out of 4, that would be absolutely fantastic.
There's always the hope, Kieran, that complacency will set in with the other nominees.
That's right.
The Guardian pod might think, we won't bother asking for votes this year. We're going to win it. You never know. I've watched enough 1950s. Ealing comedies to know that the underdog can have his day. You like Halloween, you like scary films, don't you?
I do. I have seen every single Halloween movie, and Halloween Ends, which was quite sad in a way because I followed the franchise since 1978. I think it has ended.
Yeah, good. I feel about scary films the way I feel about roller coasters. Okay, I don't see why I should pay money to scare myself. Basically, don't like them. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.